Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. And we are on our third episode of the podcast, and we are really happy to be here again with a new set of topics to discuss. Bago ang lahat, we want to take this opportunity to thank all of our listeners on making this podcast a successful and informative one. Thank you guys na sobra sa pag-listen sa episode 1 and 2 ng podcast and itong episode 3 namin ngayon. At malapit na rin tayo matapos. Oh my gosh! Pero, hindi pa doon nagtatapos ang ating pagkatuto. Kahit na malapit na tayo matapos, we're still grateful na naging part kayo sa journey namin and we are looking forward in making more podcasts with you all.
Grabe, nasa third episode na tayo ng podcast, no? Which means, malapit na tayo matapos.
Kaya nga eh.
So, ano naman feeling, guys? Kumusta naman kayo? Lalo na we are halfway through our podcast.
Well, to be honest, hindi ko rin alam yung mararamdaman ko. Hindi ko alam kung matutuwa ako o malulungkot eh. Mixed feelings pa ako ngayon. Pero dahil nakakatulong naman tayo sa mga tao, nakakabusog lang ng puso dahil kahit pandemic ngayon, nakakatulong pa rin tayo ng iba through our podcast.
Same. Mixed feelings din ako ngayon eh. And malapit na tayo matapos kaya nakakasad rin talaga. Pero at least while doing this podcast, we can learn from it and we can raise awareness rin. Not only sa sexual harassment, but also sa topic natin ngayon.
Oo nga parang kailan lang nasa episode 1 pa lang tayo and we're talking about sexual harassment doon. Pero ngayon nasa panibagong topic na tayo and I think itong topic na to ay maraming makaka-relate and marami rin silang matututunan. Lalo na mostly yung mga listeners natin ngayon ay preteens and teenagers.
Buti nabanggit nyo. Ano nga ba next topic natin ngayon, guys?
Good question, Ariana. Yung topic natin ngayon ay tungkol sa sex education. As we all know, sex education tackles various topics. So stay tuned till the end and we hope in today's episode of our podcast, marami tayong matutunan and ma-apply in real life.
That's right, Eloise. Sex education addresses various topics. Pero, wait lang, bago ang lahat, ano nga ba ang sex education?
Well, Aliana and Eloise, sex education refers to formal programs of instruction on a wide range of issues relating to human sexuality, including human sexual anatomy, sexual reproduction, reproductive health, emotional relations, reproductive rights and responsibilities, abstinence, contraceptives, and other aspects of human sexual behavior.
Also, according to SIECUS guidelines for comprehensive sexuality education, sex education has 4 main goals. First is to provide accurate information about human sexuality. Second is to provide an opportunity for young people to develop and understand their values, attitude, and insights about sexuality. Third is to assist young people in developing relationship and interpersonal skills. And lastly is to assist young people in exercising responsibility in sexual relationships, including addressing abstinence, pressures to engage in sexual intercourse prematurely, and the use of contraception and other sexual health supplements.
So basically, yung guidelines na ito ay to meet the overall goal of sex education. Meaning, para makaprovide sila sa mga preteens, teenagers, and young adults with the proper knowledge and skills to promote their health and well-being as they mature into sexually healthy adults.
Yes, tama ka dyan, Eloise. Sex education has a lot of material that teaches you to have protective sex. Sex education gives you a variety of skills that can be really beneficial to you. It also instructs you on birth control and disease prevention. There are numerous issues to consider when it comes to sex education, but it's a win because it helps young people make better decisions.
Sex ed covers a lot of topics, but as you learn, you'll be able to answer all of your questions. To begin, youth must be aware of the dangers they face in both protected and unprotected sexual situations. As a result, teens and young adults should get familiar with sex ed. That could be one of your first inquiries. Well, discussing sex with teenagers isn't a horrible thing. You're warning them about the dangers of having sex. By the time they talk to their parents, roughly 40% of young people already had sex, according to Peter DeWitt. They had already engaged in unprotected sex, which can result in unplanned pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases or STDs by this point. This is why we should urge more people to know more about sex education seminars in schools, assist them in grasping the concept that sex is more than just sex, and that it has several consequences. Furthermore, because all teenagers will have sex at some point in their lives, sex is a sensitive and vital topic that needs to be discussed.
Agree ako dyan sa inyo. Sex education is super important sa atin ngayon because it helps young people to be prepared sa anuman na challenges na kanilang haharapin. Also, hindi lang sila nakakatulong sa reproductive health outcomes, but it also creates a safe and gender-equal learning environment and improves educational opportunities.
Tama. Ang galing niyo talagang dalawa. Pero tama yung mga sinabi niyo talaga, legit. Pero, since the world is changing and changing fast with the emerging technologies and environmental uncertainty, preteens, teenagers, and young adults are facing a very different set of challenges din ngayon. Di ba?
Oh, yes.
So true.
Yeah.
Tama lahat ng sinabi nyo, guys. Kasi kung ako rin yung tatanungin nyo, may mga bagay ngang nakakatulong sa mga kabataan ngayon when we talk about sex education. Pero dahil nabanggit mo na rin, Kat, yung emerging technologies, I think dito na natin ipapasok yung tinatawag ngayon na fake news. Well, fake news, kung alam nyo man, ay talagang nakaka-apekto sa mga tao ngayon, lalo na sa social media. Kaya nga sa paglaganap ng fake news sa panahon ngayon, meron ding mga kumakalat na myths about sex education.
Sa totoo lang, Eloise, biktima rin ako sa fake news na yan Sorry, ganito lang talaga ako. Pasensya. Pero, dahil sa mga parents ko, friends, and mga informations na nakikita o naririnig ko ngayon, ay natuto naman na ako. Pero anyways, about sa myths of sex education, may idea ba kayo dito? Kasi kung ako tatanungin nyo, may mga nare-research ako dito, pero I think sobrang interesting ito i-bring up.
Well, yes, may mga nabasa naman akong articles regarding that actually before. So according to the article I've read, they say, first, comprehensive sexual health education does not address abstinence. Well, in fact, many comprehensive sexual health, also referred as Abstinence Plus, programs teach abstinence as the best way to avoid sexually transmitted infections and pregnancy. Second, showing pictures of STI symptoms prevent teens from having sex. Para sa akin naman, fear and shaming messages by themselves will not prevent them from having sex. Imbis na matakot sila ay tuturuan sila ng sex ed ng safe sex para maiwasan ang mga ito, which is why safe sex is really that important sa kabataan ngayon. Third, sabi rin nila, sex education is not for my child. It is obscene. It only teaches our children to have sex at an early age. Well, sex education does not teach children how to have sex at an early age. Instead, it even protects children, di ba?
Tama. So true.
Yes. Kasi it educates students on the physiological, social, and biological components of future sexual health. This includes gender identity, bodily changes, consent, lalo na yung consent, sexual abuse awareness, birth control, and AIDS and STD prevention.
Comprehensive sexuality education disregards values and morals. Ang totoo dyan, comprehensive sexuality education incorporates values and morals. Respect, acceptance, tolerance, equality, empathy, and reciprocity are actually linked to widely acknowledged human rights, and quality comprehensive sexuality education supports this approach. Young people can also use comprehensive sex education to explore and define their own values, as well as the values of their families and communities.
Fifth, there's no such thing as safe sex. Kung ako tatanungin nyo, super common na ito, particularly in areas where abstinence-only sex education is widely practiced. While abstinence is the only method to guarantee you won't get pregnant or develop an STD, there are plenty of other ways to stay safe when it comes to sex. Condoms, birth control, and so on. Thus, there is such a thing as safe sex. And abstinence is not the only option for everyone. Kasi not all can choose to not have sex, right?
Yes, so true. Grabe, ang dami rin palang mga myths about sex education, no? Well, to be honest, Kat and Eliana, wala rin akong idea about sa myths ng sex education back then. Pero, kailan lang gusto ko rin malaman yung mga myths na meron sa sex ed, kaya nag-research ako about it and marami ako nakita. But what strikes me the most is yung 5 myths na na-research ko and pinag-aralan ko. Magsimula tayo sa sinasabi nilang everything gets you pregnant. Technically, everything will get you pregnant. However, dahil nga dito ginawa yung mga condoms, birth control, and so on, there are plenty of other ways to not get pregnant. We live in a country where teenage pregnancy is rising every day. But with proper safe sex and with consent, not everything will get you pregnant. Sunod naman ay yung sinasabi nilang sex education is just about sex. Sa totoo lang, ang sex education ay hindi lang naman about sex yung pinag-uusapan. Sex ed is a program that teaches young people about health and sexuality, not just sex. It's more about that, a lot more about that. Sex ed instructs us on how to understand our bodies and how they function, as well as to how to create and sustain healthy relationships of all kinds, from friendships to romantic unions. For the rest of our lives, we will have greater health and higher quality of life as a result of this. Anatomy, safety, respect, gender norms, identity and self-expression, romance and love, values, power dynamics, our rights over our bodies, and the diversity of human bodies are all topics covered in sex ed classes. It entails honing the abilities required to effectively communicate, make decisions, assert and respect boundaries, be ethical as a person and in relationships, deal with rejection, care for our bodies, and manage our health. It's also a tool for developing critical thinking, emotional intelligence, leadership, and self-advocacy abilities. Sinasabi rin nila na condoms are not effective. Well, when used regularly and correctly, condoms are highly efficient in preventing human immunodeficiency virus or HIV and very successful in preventing most STIs or sexually transmitted infections. This is according to US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Condoms are highly successful in preventing HIV transmission, reducing the spread of gonorrhea and chlamydia, providing good pregnancy prevention, and lowering the risk of human papillomavirus when the afflicted area is covered.
Thank you, Luis and Kat. Sobrang nakakatulong talaga yung mga informations na ni-research nyo. Pati ako nga, I'm so glad na may natutunan ako ngayon about these kinds of myths na narinig ng mga tao ngayon. Especially mga kabataan na mostly na victim rin sa mga sabi-sabi about sex education.
I agree kasi ayun nga, daming myths about sex education na naghihinder sa mga bata na matutunan to, di ba? Parang iniisip kasi nila na tuturuan ka mag-sex dito, ganyan. Which is hindi naman talaga, di ba? Tinuturo nga dito kung paano yung kumbaga parang proper ways to have sex or gano'n para maiwasan din para in the future, di ba? Kasi hindi natin maiwasan yung sex. Depende na lang kung ayaw nyo talaga magkipag-sex, di ba? Pero in the future, kung syempre gusto mo magkaanak, ganyan, ng partner nyo, you have to, and yun nga, para in the future, alam niyo yung gagawin nyo para maiwasan yung mga tulad na nga lang yung kanina, parang STDs or something like that. Diba?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, since dahil na-discuss na natin yung meaning ng sex education and yung mga myths nila, meron ba kayong alam kung saang factor pa nakaka-help ang sex ed?
Well, sex education plays an important role to the human development. Kasi it would also teach people about reproduction, puberty, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Yung pag-aaral ng mga stuff na to is indeed a necessity kasi you will get to know others and pati na rin yung sarili mo.
Agree ako sa'yo, Eloise, kasi learning about reproduction and puberty would make you conscious towards your actions. One example nito is kapag may uterus ka, then nagkakaroon ka na ng monthly period, di ba? Unless may medical condition ka. Pero, yeah, syempre, ililimit mo na yung sarili mo na sa mga sarili mo na gumawa ng certain things or sa mga certain things. Kasi dapat mas conservative ka na kasi may mga bagay na prone na mangyari sa'yo such as pregnancy.
Nabanggit din ni Eloise na yung sex ed is nakakatulong sa sexual orientation and gender identity. Well, it helps when it comes sa mga bagay na yon because tinuturo ng sex ed ang mga indicators if saang sex ka belong. One example for sex indicators is yung mga genitals since magkakaibang meron sa male and meron sa female. At natuturo din kasi ng sexual education yung mga sexual processes na nagtitake place once a person hit puberty stage. These certain processes are additional contributors to help an individual identify their sexual orientation and gender identity. Pero diba, not all the time ganun yung case. Kasi there are people who believe that they should be born in their opposite sex. So, magde-decide sila na palitan yung gender nila. And we respect their decision.
Yes, of course, we respect their decision. Aside sa pagtulong ng sex ed sa human development, nakakatulong din ito sa relationships natin because it will teach us kung ano yung mga pinagdadaanan ng isa't isa. Like, pagdating sa mga sexual-related stuff.
Tama ka dyan, Eloise. Siguro, wag na tayong lumayo. Since nabanggit naman yung menstruation kanina, yun na lang yung gagamitin ko na example. Kapag may nagkaroon ng mens, tas sabi niya, nagka-cramps ako. Automatic na response ng other girls or ibang tao ay, magpahinga ka muna, o kaya uminom ka ng gamot, or, babe, mag-hot compress ka. Through that, na-express yung care sa ibang tao and mas nasa-strengthen yung bond nila.
Yes, dahil dyan sa sinabi mo, Aliana, naalala ko tuloy yung mga times na kunyari, nasa school ako, tapos may period ako, tapos period cramps, tapos yun nga, ganyan nga yung mga sinasabi niyo sa akin.
Tapos pupunta tayong clinic.
Oo, sama-sama tayo, gano'n. Nice lang, okay.
Ang hirap ng hot compress. Famous,
True.
Sa nurse.
Oo, totoo yan.
Pero yeah, dahil nga dyan sa sinabi mo, Aliana, we could say that sex ed could also teach us how to respect other people that we have a relationship with. Not only respect, but also acknowledge their feelings. Like, matututo tayo isipin yung kapakanan ng iba. Yan, tulad nga ng mga ginagawa natin sa isa't isa, no?
So, other than sa nakaka-help ang sex ed sa human development and to our relationships, nakakatulong din siya sa personal skills and sa sexual behavior.
Yes, gaya nga ng sabi ng marami, we are humans who are still learning and along the way, we pick up pieces of information that will eventually make us complete. Sexual education is an enhancer of our character. Being educated about that area will take us numerous steps further towards human development, particularly boosting our personal skills and our appropriate sexual behavior, including communication, negotiation, decision-making, abstinence, and sexuality throughout life.
Regarding communication, voicing out our matters is a must today. People communicate in many ways, making communication necessary in human relationships. Many people have different styles of communicating. People who have different styles of communicating may have a difficult time understanding each other. Nevertheless, dapat alam pa rin natin ang angkop or appropriate way of communicating when touching sensitive topics like the one we are discussing today.
Yes, it is right for us to know the appropriate way of communicating as this will lead us to a favorable outcome. So here is how you start proper communication. Listening attentively, making eye contact, expressing feelings using messages that begin with I, ako, or or anything to indicate that the person is speaking for themselves, attempting to understand the other person's perspective, offering possible solutions to problems, sending positive nonverbal messages such as a smile or touch or maybe a hug, and asking for clarification.
Touching the topic of sex ed, openly communicating about our sexuality can improve relationships. Nevertheless, some people are uncomfortable about discussing sexuality in this manner. That is why we must think about how the other party feels. Kasi communication is crucial nga in both human and professional interactions. The most efficient way to express one's needs without hurting or dominating others is through assertive communication.
Next is how we boost our negotiating skills. All parties involved in a negotiation must give and take, and good negotiation can improve relationships and friendships.
And effective negotiating requires the following abilities as well: careful observation of others, open body language, good verbal communication, picturing oneself in other people's shoes, identifying all choices in a situation, imagining oneself in other people's shoes, parang yung kanina rin, and reaching a shared understanding with others.
Now, kailangan nating malaman kung ano ang negotiation at hindi. Teenagers who are dating must learn to negotiate sexual behaviors and limits. Manipulation differs from negotiation in that it attempts to unfairly manipulate someone's decision or conduct without taking into consideration or account their feelings or needs.
Decision making is also essential, especially for people who are transitioning from being a teen to our young adult stage. All decisions have positive and or negative repercussions. And of course, making better decisions is a skill that can be developed.
True. Kaya mahalaga lang na marunong tayong mag-decision minsan para sa sarili natin, di ba? And to make a good decision, one must analyze or predict all of the possible outcomes, both positive and negative, and choose the course of action that one believes will result in the best outcome. Yes. Parang i-weigh mo lang muna yung dalawang sides ng pipiliin mo. And kung ano ang mas best, syempre, dun ka, di ba? Yun yung pipiliin mo.
Yes. Also, some young individuals must take difficult choices concerning their sexuality, such as whether or not to establish a sexual relationship and what the partnership's boundaries should be. Due to sexual sensations and pressure from partners or peers, making decisions about sexuality can be challenging. Teenagers who choose to engage in sexual activity must also consider pregnancy and the prevention of STDs.
Now, moving on to sexual behavior. In terms of abstinence, this is also a commendable practice since it offers numerous benefits. Abstinence refers to a person's voluntary decision not to engage in specific sexual behaviors, such as those that could result in pregnancy or acquiring a sexually transmitted diseases or STD, such as HIV.
Yes, I agree with that. And speaking of engaging in intimate relationships, teenagers in romantic relationships can express their feelings without engaging in sexual activity. Kasi di ba kung love nyo naman yung isa't isa, hindi naman magiging sukatan yung sex sa inyo, di ba? And it is a must that they should discuss sexual boundaries with their dating partners every time they date. And they should also respect their partner's sexual boundaries.
Yes. And lastly, as for our sexuality throughout life, questions may also be raised. Some people are not open about these topics, resulting in teenage pregnancies and other undesirable occurrences. For starters, most children are curious about their bodies because our bodies can feel good when touched, di ba? And that's a fact.
Oh, hindi ko nalaman yun na. And as people become older, they become more curious about their sexuality. And talking to parents and other trusted adults about it can be beneficial because they are more informed in that area. And being open to them will help us explore our sexuality more. And of course, adults should educate young ones.
I agree. And all people, regardless of biological sex, gender, age, ability, and culture, are sexual beings. We cannot deny that. Sexuality can be more rewarding and positive when expressed in a sharing, enhancing, and non-exploitative way.
Yes. Learning these necessities will help us navigate the sexual world more. And it should not be labeled as embarrassing or such, since exploring this area will help us progress in life, especially in the coming future, as this area is packed with information that is essential for human development.
We hope that we can be more open to talking about the topics of sexual education and to be more aware of its myths. We recommend that we learn more about human development because I think that it is difficult to learn about it through podcasts. If you want to talk with us about sex education, you can contact us on our Facebook page, Your Safe Space, or you can send an email to us on talkitoutwithyss@gmail.com. So, dear listeners, we will listen and you are free to reach out to us anytime.
This is the second to the last episode for this season, and make sure to stay tuned for our last episode for season 1. This episode ends here, and again, this is your safe space where you can talk a lot out with us. Goodbye!
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you!
Goodbye.
Yo!